get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. So glad you can join us, whether you're listening at www.behindenemylinesradio.us or if you're checking us out on AM radio, FM radio, internet radio. We're glad you tuned in, locked and loaded. Or if we're traveling along with you as a podcast, we're so happy to be along for the ride. We've got a great show this week. We got, for the first time ever, a Democrat has stepped up to the plate to go behind enemy lines with us. And I'm talking about self-proclaimed conservative Democrat, attorneys for civil rights matters, talk show host in the Atlanta, Georgia area, Robert Patillo is going to join us to talk about the main issue that is redefining American culture right now. And that is this whole controversy over kneeling during NFL games by NFL players for the national anthem. Now, folks, there can be a million different things we can be talking about right now. There are so many important issues that we could be dealing with at this point. The president's new tax reform package that we can talk about that has business owners jumping for joy, but not necessarily middle-class citizens or, Democrats whose heads are exploding over this. We could be talking about disaster relief in any number of places, including Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Puerto Rico. We're going to be talking about so many more important things. But here we are, probably a week after, as this show is being broadcast and you're hearing it, a week after the President of the United States chimed in on an issue that really had been simmering for about a year and a half. And it all started with Buffoon of the Year nominee Colin Kaepernick, if you remember our Buffoon of the Year contest last year, kneeling during the national anthem in protest of what he considered to be disproportionate violence by police against African Americans. Now, this has morphed and evolved and been co-opted over and over, and we'll talk about that with Robert Patillo later in the show. But I want to frame the issue as best I can right now so we can have a good jumping off point for when we're talking about what's going on, what the real issues are, and how things are being morphed and changed. Politics is very strange, folks, as you know. If you're listening to this show, you're probably already seasoned in politics somewhat. You don't find us and as a novice in politics and think that you know everything or that, you're even remotely interested in the nuances. You have to be if you're listening to this show. And that's cool. We like you guys a lot. Newcomers, especially if you're listening at our new time, you're more than welcome as well. But let's frame an issue together. The issue of whether a football player can kneel during the national anthem is separate than the issue of should a football player kneel during the national anthem. And we're going to take those two separate issues and talk about them separately. First one being, can a player kneel? The short answer is maybe. There's two things at play here. First is the idea that someone has First Amendment rights to free speech, which, by the way, when everybody brings up a free speech argument, I don't think people realize that free speech is a protection from government regulating your speech, not necessarily a business or an employer regulating your speech. There are certain things you give up when you are employed by someone, One of them is possibly the idea to protest on the job an issue that your boss may or may not like you to protest. We all have to go through this all the time. I cannot speak out against the interests of a client because I think that the client is not a good person. When I'm dealing in my law practice, I have to deal with the client, and the client has certain rights that I have to preserve, even if I don't like them, because my boss has taken the client in, and I'm subject to his assignment of work. He has to tell me what cases I can work on, which ones I don't. He helps me game plan what my work will entail. Same thing with an NFL player. You're a player on the Bears who may be scheduled to play the Packers isn't going to say, well, I'm going to go play the Giants this week. That's not what happens. A player who's assigned to be an offensive tackle doesn't say, well, I'm going to be a wide receiver this week. Doesn't happen. A player says, I don't want to do the run and shoot offense. I want to do, more of a ground and pound running game. That's not his call. There's a hierarchy to every business, whether professional sports or your everyday business life. People are told what to do and what to say all the time in their jobs. So there is no First Amendment protection for people against their employer. There is protection against government infringing upon free speech. That's what the First Amendment's all about. So whether or not you can or not will depend upon whether your employer is willing to tolerate what you're saying, whether they feel it's an important issue for the business as a whole to tolerate. You saw that with Jerry Jones going down with his players and kneeling, but doing so before the game. You see it with the NBA saying and circulating memos to teams saying all players are required to stand for the anthem. You see it in different aspects of life. You have employee handbooks that you must follow. I'm sure that there are plenty of businesses, larger businesses, that have media scrutiny that tell their employees that they cannot speak out to the media on issues of business concern. It's all out there all the time. So what makes an NFL player different? There is no difference. Your employer will determine whether you can or not. Now, whether you can convince your employer, like Colin Kaepernick did, or other players have, that this is important and you want to do it, like the Pittsburgh Steelers decided, is something to be debated. Now you're getting into the should you portion of the show. Should the player, Mr. Villanueva from the Steelers, gone out in defiance of what his employers said and stand there and salute the flag? It's a matter of debate. His employer said no. Was there any retribution from it? Again, that would be up to the employer. We shall see. But the point being is when you are employed by someone, you give up certain quote-unquote rights and privileges that you think you have in exchange for being paid to perform a task the manner in which is directed by your employer. That takes care of the can. The can issue is, nebulous and all that. The next issue is should. Should players kneel for the anthem in protest of any issue? And frankly, I have to break this down in a couple of different ways. Way number one is, what exactly are you protesting? Has there been a clear articulation of what you want to protest? And whether your team has approved it or not, fine. But what is it you're protesting? Colin Kaepernick was very clear. In recent weeks with the NFL, it has not been so clear. I believe that different players are responding to different things. One of which they're doing is they're manifesting a reaction to President Trump's comments that people who are protesting are SOBs and should be fired. One man's opinion, exercising his right to that opinion to express it, and there's a knee-jerk reaction coming from NFL teams, NFL management, the league in general, and players. So are we now protesting getting down on our knees? Are we protesting police violence against minorities? Are we protesting Donald Trump being mad that you're doing it? Are you protesting something else? I don't know. It needs to be articulated. If it's articulated internally within the team, fine. I don't need to hear it. But it needs to be articulated. The second part of this is, why do it during the national anthem? The national anthem is a time that is meant to bring the nation together before a game, regardless of what side you're on. We all stand up in unison together. The anthem plays out of respect for the country that allows such a sport to exist, that allows a climate by which we have freedom and liberty. And then we get on with the competition. We even do the same thing, give the courtesy to other teams that come from other parts of the world that play sports in the United States. We played a Canadian national anthem during the NHL games. And everyone, whether they're American or Canadian, remains standing for that, out of respect for that country. I guess the issue comes down to respect. Are you disrespecting the nation by protesting at a moment that is meant and intended to bring the nation together as one? I think it's inappropriate in this respect. You are now creating a division at a moment of unity. Whether you can protest and whether, people fought and died for the right for you to protest, that's all well and good. I think a soldier, a combat veteran, a military veteran, any type of veteran would be able to say, you know what? I fought for the right for you to do this. I get it. I may not like the content of what you're saying, but fine, you have rights to do it, subject to the rights of your boss to stop you from doing it. But to do it to the anthem, I think is just disrespectful to those people who fought for those rights for us to enjoy. I think it's disrespectful, especially, veterans overseas, combat veterans overseas, those in forward areas overseas. They want to be entertained by an NFL game. They don't want to deal with protests and political issues and all these concerns. There's a better way, I guess is what I'm saying, than protesting the anthem. You can do what the Cowboys did and protest before the anthem. There are many different ways that you can have your voice heard. You can go out into your community, NFL players, and you can decide to be a force for change in those communities. Why not organize meetings between community groups and the police to see what you can get done? Why not donate to groups that you believe will forward your cause and give them the ammunition financially to do what they can in their communities? Why not get active in groups and actually create a group of your own and do that off the field on your own time with your own money? I would support that. It doesn't matter what your message is, but you would have the right to do that. I just don't want you doing it during the anthem. To me, that's a sacred time. I mean, when I used to be a season ticket holder to some baseball games, some minor league baseball, one of the things that I always did around my section is if there was someone wearing a cap during the anthem before the baseball game, we would kindly ask that person in the section to remove their cap and show respect. It's just something that you did. I mean, even now during, the Super Bowl, or can I say Super Bowl? I don't even know if I can. During the big game, I stand up in my living room, Whitney Houston singing, whoever may be singing, I would stand up in my living room for that, out of respect. I think respect, though it may be in the eye of the beholder, there are certain things that we should be able to agree upon. One of those things we should be able to agree upon is that there are certain moments when we all need to just stand in reverence and unify together. And then we can fight about all our differences later on. Look, I believe that there needs to be a discussion. As our guest Robert Patillo, who you'll hear from in a little bit, agrees. There needs to be a discussion about race in America and police activity with people of color. However, if you look at the numbers, when you look at violent acts by police against, private citizens, the majority of the people who are bearing the brunt of that are not people of color, by the way. They're people like me, white males who are being attacked, if you want to say attacked, brutalized, if you want to say brutalized, having intentional acts committed against them that may or may not have been necessary. We need to address a culture that has police harming first and asking questions later. I don't think that that's an issue. I think that's a healthy discussion. Whether it be handled at the federal level through, amending of civil rights laws and making penalties there, or be handled at the local level. Whether it's federal or local, I'm open to that discussion. But let's do it at the right moment. And during the national anthem, during an NFL game, is not the right moment. What you're doing is you're turning off a lot of the people who would, like me, who would be willing to talk to you, who would be willing to address these issues.